Hi everyone. For today's discussion, we will be going over single case design. So for our agenda today, we will first review single case design, including the core features, design types, and how to do a visual analysis. Then we will go over your activity for this week, which is evaluating different single case design studies. So first, let's go over the core features of single case design. So unlike true experiments, where the researcher randomly assigns participants to a control and treatment group, in single subject research, the participant serves as both the control and treatment group. The researcher uses line graphs to show the effects of a particular intervention or treatment. It emphasizes intensive repeated observations of a particular subject in order to demonstrate precise control over a targeted behavior. With this in mind, all the single case design studies have these four features in common. They must demonstrate repeated assessment, be within a case, and this can either be with an individual student or it can be with a classroom. Intervention must be present and absent, so typically some type of withdrawal or some type of manipulation in which we can tell that the intervention is actually having an impact on the behavior. And finally, the intervention must be under the researcher's control. So next, let's go over types of single case designs. An ABA design, also known as a reversal design, involves discontinuing the intervention and returning to a non-treatment condition. In an ABA B design, the intervention is implemented immediately after baseline. This is followed by a measurement without the intervention, also called a withdrawal, and then a repeat of the intervention. The behavior must be reversible and withdrawal must be ethical. Next, let's go over multiple baseline. In a multiple baseline across subjects design, the researcher introduces the intervention to different persons at different times. The significance of this is that if a behavior changes only after the intervention is presented, and this behavior change is seen successfully in each subject's data, the effects can more likely be credited to the intervention itself as opposed to other variables. Multiple baseline designs do not require the intervention to be withdrawn. Instead, each subject's own data are compared between intervention and non-intervention behaviors, resulting in each subject acting as his or her own control. This is considered a more ethical design because you're not taking away an intervention that may be beneficial to the student. So when considering which types of single case design to use, it's important to consider both what is ethical and what makes sense for that type of intervention. While there are other types of single case designs, we will just be going over these two. Next, let's talk about visual analysis. So typically when conducting a visual analysis of single case design, you'll be looking at level, trend, variability, and immediacy. So for level, you want to look at, does the level increase or decrease? So in this picture, we see that the level decreased because it lowered from the baseline to the intervention. For trend, we want to see how it's changing. Is it an increasing or decreasing trend? And in some cases, it can be a neutral or zero trend. Here we see an increasing trend, and here we see a decreasing trend. Variability, more or less. So in this first example, there's more variability because we see that there's bigger changes in the data points, which suggests that there's not a stable trend. Whereas here, we see that there's less variability between the data points. Immediacy, how soon after the phase change. So a single case design, a key thing that we want to see is that once the intervention is implemented, we want to see an immediate change between baseline and intervention phases. So it should look something like this graph where we see maybe here, for example, this is problem behavior. There's an immediate decrease in problem behavior between the baseline and intervention phase. So for your activity for this week, you're going to be reviewing several different single case design studies and then filling out a handout to practice identifying the type of single case design and also identifying some elements of visual analysis. So for the before you do the handout, we're going to go over one together in this video. So the name of the first article is Self-Monitoring as a Viable Fading Option in Check-In and Check-Out. So the abstract reads, this study systematically replaced the teacher-completed daily behavior report card and feedback component of check-in, check-out with self-monitoring for 4 elementary students referred for Tier 2 behavioral supports within school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports. An ABAB withdrawal design was used to test the effectiveness of check-in, check-out. Then, following the second B phase, teacher completion of the DBRC and corresponding feedback to students was replaced with self-monitoring. For all 4 participants, check-in, check-out was associated with increases in academic engagement and reductions in disruptive behavior. Moreover, students' behavioral gains were maintained when teacher completion of the DBRC was replaced with self-monitoring. Results are discussed in terms of check-in, check-out research and practice. So next, let's take a look at some of their results. So as stated in the abstract, they had 4 different participants. However, just for the sake of practice, we'll just look at 2. So we see that here the triangle represents problem behavior and the square represents academic engagement. Generally, we can see that with problem behavior, there seems to be some changes in terms of level, trend, and variability for both students. And the same thing with academic engagement, which is represented by the squares. We'll go over this in more detail in one moment. But first, as a part of your handout, you'll first be filling out the author. If there's a lot of authors, it's okay to do the first name of the author and then et al. Year 2015. For this article, the dependent variables were problem behavior and academic engagement. For the independent variable, they used a check-in, check-out intervention with self-monitoring. And then you're going to be checking off whether or not they meet all of the core features required for this to be a single case design. So did they have repeated assessments? We can say yes, that they did, because they had 4 students that they assessed over roughly a month. Each student served as their own baseline and control group, which means that they also used it within a case. With intervention present and absent, authors included a withdrawal to determine the effects of the problem behavior without the intervention. And finally, we can also check off that the intervention was under the researcher's control. The authors manipulated when the intervention took place based on the stability of the trend line. When a stable or increasing trend was observed in the baseline levels of the problem behavior, the check-in, check-out was implemented. However, when the problem behavior displayed a decreasing trend or was stable at a level below the level observed during baseline, the check-in, check-out was withdrawn. So we can see that when implementing both their intervention and withdrawal baseline phases, they were intentional with making sure that the baseline trend demonstrated stability. So that way they could make conclusions whether or not the intervention was in fact affecting student behavior. So then last, you'll be practicing doing some visual analysis in the articles on iLearn. So for this article, let's first look at level. So for level, we see that there's generally an increase in level for academic engagement and a decrease in level for problem behavior. So let's look at Andrew, for example. For Andrew, we see here at the baseline, this is his problem behavior, and then we see that there is a decrease in level for problem behavior after the intervention was implemented. And then for academic engagement, his baseline was around the 50% range. And then we see an increase in level, and now his academic engagement is closer between the 90 to 100% range. For trend, we generally see an increasing trend line for academic engagement and a decreasing trend line for problem behavior. However, in Andrew's case, we see towards the end, when the intervention and then self-monitoring maintenance phase is in place, we see more of a neutral or 0 trend line here with Andrew. However, with Lisa, we generally see an increasing trend right here with the implementation of the intervention. And then here it still seems like it may be increasing, although it's a little less clear because as we get into the next part, Lisa's has much more variability. So Lisa's results generally show more variability, whereas Andrew's has much less variability towards the end of the intervention study. In terms of immediacy, we see immediate changes across phases for both students. So for example, when we look at Lisa's, we see an immediate change from her baseline to a decrease in her problem behavior and an increase of her academic engagement. However, there is one place where it seems that there wasn't a big immediate drop. So in that case, sometimes it may be unclear if there was an actual immediate change. However, for both Lisa and Andrew, generally we can say that the intervention did effectively change their behaviors immediately across phases. So now that we've gone through that example, you're going to practice on your own. You'll be looking through the articles posted on iLearn. You don't necessarily have to read through the whole article, but what you do want to look for is their method and look at their graphs. And then after you practice doing your data visual analysis, maybe compare what you wrote to the results section that the authors wrote and see if you generally made the same conclusions. So you'll be completing the handout to practice identifying types of single case design and to practice a visual analysis of the results. Thank you, and feel free to email me if you have any questions.